Hi guys. So, in these portions, last Shabbat and this coming Shabbat, we received the commandments of the Tabernacle. And then later in the portions of Vayakel and Pekudei, they're kind of the sister pair where we see the actual enactment of what was commanded. And so naturally, this idea of having a tabernacle, a focal point of holiness in our lives, brings up a lot of questions. And one of them is, how do we properly orient ourselves in life now? Because, the end goal of the tabernacle is that Hashem dwell in our midst. But without a tabernacle or a temple, how do we draw from these portions and learn how to live a life of holiness and godliness through our actions in our life, without that actual, without that structure? And the idea I want to share actually struck me from hearing an interview by a professor named Brandon Warmke, who's a professor of philosophy and wrote a book called Why It's Okay to Mind Your Own Business. The main thrust of his idea being that in our generation, the ethical weight has been, put on doing that which is great and grand. If you listen to any high school or college commencement speech, the main theme is always going to be do something great, make a name for yourself, save the world, save the whales, save the planet. And his argument is that that type of endeavor might give a feeling of morality, but without any actual weight, it's really just sizzle, no steak. If you feel you're saving the world by telling everyone else not to drive their cars, but in reality you've done nothing that's really difficult and of moral gravity, then what have you done? The idea being that, fixing something grand is going to make me in some way better, rather than understanding that the real work comes from working from within and then spreading out perhaps little by little. Not to say that you don't need big dreamers in the world, but that's not really for most people. And I found that really powerful, especially for those of us, theoretically, who perhaps might be surrounded by some people who have, who think big and have huge dreams and plans and projects and want to save Israel. And you, for example, might just be a person trying to get their laundry room in order and trying to help a kid who's struggling with her letters and maybe just trying to get your own mind in order. And you can sometimes feel like, well, where do I fit in all of this? My world is small. I don't have grand plans to fix the world. Do my little efforts and my daily struggles even matter? And so this professor's words really resonated for me, because he was saying that it's the heart and soul of what, he calls morality, we here might call goodness, godliness, holiness. But the idea is that it's to start from within with humility, and actually from our inner work, we can actually affect more good in the world than wasting all of our mental energy on trying to think of how the entire world needs to become better in things that we really have very little influence on. And once I internalized that idea, it really came alive for me in these Torah portions, because interestingly, Moshe asks in the Parsha of Terumah for donations that each person can bring whatever they want. And it specifies you can bring more, you can bring less, bring whatever you want. And there's this national project with room for huge donations and little donations. What's interesting is that, you can give whatever your heart wants to this big project. But you can't really read Terumah without jumping to chapter 35, because in chapter 35, we hear that actually everyone became completely taken with this grand project. And it brings so much that in 36:6, we hear, so Moses commanded, and they announced in the camp, saying, let no man or woman do any more work for the offering of the holy. And so the people stopped bringing. Moshe actually has to stop them from donating. And the word here in English is that they stopped bringing, but that's not the word in Hebrew. The word in Hebrew is actually a very unusual word for stopping. It says vayikalet. Kelet in Hebrew actually means a prison, meaning they imprisoned themselves from bringing. It's not just stopping bringing, it's like imprisoning yourself. That's a weird word. What does it mean to imprison yourself? Well, let's think about what a prison is. A prison is like an enclosed space. So you want to go out there and make the tabernacle. Everyone wants to make the tabernacle and have your efforts go to the holiest thing that there is. But wait, you have all these strengths. It's not needed anymore in the holy. It's too much. You have your world where your efforts can actually make a bigger difference. So it's not like Moshe saying bring nothing to the grand story, but your primary efforts actually need to be imprisoned in the area where you have true control and influence. The Sfat Emet says on this, why did Moshe want them to stop? Because it got to a place where they felt like, wow, I'm doing so much. I'm doing so good. My gifts are so large. And he said, this is a terrible danger in having this belief that you can actually single-handedly yourself bring about the completion of Hashem's will in the world. And think I'm the one who built the house of God. And that's interesting, because parallel to bringing these gifts, they were commanded to bring a half a shekel of silver. Now, a half shekel is interesting because there were so many gifts. Why do you even need a half shekel? But there's something really illuminating about realizing that you're not bringing even a whole shekel. Every person brings a half shekel. You are not able to complete things. You bring to the world something, but you're not going to complete it. And in chapter 38, interestingly, when we get the tally of everything that built the temple, it turns out that the half shekels built more in the temple than just the heartfelt donations. And what's super interesting also is the sink. It says about the copper sink the priests used to clean themselves, what it was made out of. It actually says in chapter 38 they were made out of mirrors. We could just know that they're made out of copper. Like, what does it matter what they were originally? They were melted into a sink. It's like it's there also to tell you that the fundamental work of the priests preparing themselves for the highest level of work starts from something made out of a mirror. Like looking back at yourself, you can't really do something grand in the service of others until you've really looked inwards and fixed yourself. And that reminded me of an amazing passage in Avot Rabbi Natan, Lessons of Ethical Teachings of Rabbi Natan, which is a book that's something akin to Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Father. Some think it's like an explication of that. In any event, in chapter 11, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, what should you do if you have nothing to do? Now, that's a fabulous question, right? Because like, it's hard that it was even to imagine that it was asked like almost 2,000 years ago when people had to wash their clothes in the river and draw water from the well. Like, could you ever really be bored and have nothing to do? That sounds like a question that we'd be asking in 2024, right? Like in a generation where people are so comfortable that they have to watch Netflix and YouTube because you don't have anything to do. And the sages, though, are still asking, well, what do you do when you have nothing to do? And when it's coming from a rabbi, it's like a no-brainer. I asked this at the Shabbat table yesterday. I said, what would a rabbi say you should do if you have nothing to do? And everyone called out at once, go learn Torah, right? That seems like the obvious go-to answer for rabbis. But that's not what they say. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, find a piece of garden or field that's empty and plant it. Make it flourish. Now that's so interesting. What is he saying? The question is, what do you do when you have nothing to do? What does it mean you have nothing to do? It's like you've set yourself up properly in your life, and your life is not in a total state of disarray and chaos. You're actually like doing okay. Now you wait till you've done that, and then what do? You don't have to go out and conquer the Talmud, and you don't have to conquer any kind of, social justice. You go out, the place closest to you, to like the garden next to you, and you see if you can put it in order, make it a little bit more beautiful. Maybe that could be, parallel to stepping out for something in the community. Maybe there's a person in your community that's struggling. It's really a marvelous passage. Take something that's desolate and make it beautiful in your surrounding. And I think it's amazing because it's also really timely, like when such big things are happening in Israel, and so many people, including me, often feel helpless to actually know like what to do for Israel. It's interesting that the Torah, in describing this massive redemptive project of building the tabernacle, shows us our primary efforts need, even when we think that they're going to be to do something grand and great and amazing and famous, the Torah reminds us all the time, it starts within you. You look in the mirror. You set your home straight. You take all those things that you want to bring to the tabernacle and bring them back into your home. Enclose them. Imprison them in your home. That's really what Hashem is asking from us, or at least most of us. And, this really, for me, connected to the vision of what it means to be waiting for Mashiach and to be waiting for redemption. Because sometimes, I'll be honest, it's a little bit embarrassing, but sometimes I'm sure some of you have thought of this also, I get a little bit nervous about Mashiach times coming, because I say, if everything is good, what will be my point? If I have any day, Jeremy will tell you, if I have any day where I'm not super busy, I will almost instantly become depressed and feel like my life is meaningless. Why? Because if I have nothing to fix, then what am I doing? And sometimes I get a little bit nervous about redemption, because I think to myself, if everything's going to be going great and Mashiach has fixed everything, well, what am I going to do? And I think what this is teaching us is that even when there's the tabernacle or the temple, even when things are fixed on a grand scale, the real work then can actually begin. That's where we need to be oriented, is to an inner work of fixing ourselves, fixing our surroundings, maintaining that which we've created. And if everyone did that, just imagine how marvelous the world could be if people understood, if the outside was fixed, the political systems and the social systems were, corrected, we could actually focus on that which the Torah is telling us is the main thing, which is to look in the mirror, to go inwards, and from that space to spread out little by little and fix ourselves and fix our surroundings. And so with that, I wish everybody a good week, and I hope that this kind of gives a little bit of strength and encouragement to those of us who are working in our little spheres to try to make things, better piece by piece to the best of our abilities. So bye guys, have a great week.